The Grand Hall of the Virexian Imperium had seen countless executions, yet today the air was heavier than usual. The obsidian columns rose like the ribs of some great cosmic beast, the vaulted ceiling depicting scenes of conquest stretching back millennia. The Imperium prided itself on its unbroken chain of rulers, each one crowned in victory over the ashes of another civilization. But today, it was their empress who knelt in chains. Lysara Virex, High Sovereign of the Thousand Stars, knelt with her silver hair disheveled, her ornate gown torn, her pale skin marked by bruises. Her hands trembled not from fear but from humiliation. She had been dragged from her own flagship after her fleet was obliterated in orbit over New Kyoto by humans. The Virexian court gathered in tense silence, their golden masks hiding expressions of shock and contempt. On the raised dais stood a man in simple black combat fatigues, Commander Ethan Cross, the human responsible for Lysara's capture. He looked down at her, his voice carrying effortlessly in the hushed chamber. "You ordered the annihilation of the Ardent Colony," Ethan said, his tone cold but even. 50,000 civilians burned because they refused to pay tribute. Give me one reason not to end you right now. Lysara's throat tightened. She had never begged in her life. But as she met his eyes, not the slit pupils of her people, not the calculating gleam of the court, but something burning and alien in its intensity, she knew the truth: humans were different. They fought for something more than power. And for the first time she feared she would die here. "I will give you everything," she said, her voice breaking just enough to make the court lean forward. "My fleets, my worlds. I will crown you as my co-ruler. Together we will build something new. An empire born of human will and Virexian power." A murmur rippled through the court. An empress offering her throne to a conqueror. It was unthinkable. Ethan's brow furrowed. "You want to save your skin. That's all." "No," Lysara whispered, lowering her head until her forehead touched the cold marble. "I want to survive, but I want something more. You've shown me what I've never seen in my own kind. Defiance without greed, mercy without weakness. I need that. The galaxy needs that." He didn't answer right away. He simply stared at her as the silence pressed in. Middle. The alliance no one believed in. Against every expectation, Ethan didn't execute her. Instead, he ordered her freed from the execution roster, but under constant human guard. For weeks, the Imperium's nobles whispered of weakness and betrayal, but Ethan didn't care. He saw in her something he couldn't quite name. Maybe desperation, maybe sincerity. They met daily in the War Council chamber aboard the human flagship Vanguard. Lysara, stripped of her throne but still regal, spoke of the Imperium's rotting foundations, nobles who siphoned resources, fleets bloated with ceremonial titles, worlds abandoned to pirates once tribute was collected. "You think the Imperium is strong," she told him one evening as holographic star maps hovered between them. "It's not. It's a dying beast, feeding on its own flesh. You crushed my fleet because it was hollow inside. You could rule over the rubble. Or we could rebuild it into something that lasts." Ethan folded his arms. "And you think humans should sit on that throne?" "No," she corrected, a glint in her eyes. "One human. You." He scoffed, but her words lingered. Lysara began teaching him the political web of her empire, which noble houses could be swayed, which worlds would revolt, which fleets would pledge loyalty to a leader who promised stability. She also learned from him the human principles of governance, the strange idea of elected councils, the almost absurd notion that leadership was a duty instead of a divine right. As the weeks passed, the unthinkable happened. Joint fleets began patrolling together. Human marines stood alongside Virexian honor guards. The galaxy's most feared enemies began to speak the same orders. Yet not everyone welcomed this. Lord Varric, Lysara's cousin and one of the most powerful admirals in the Imperium, declared her a traitor. He claimed Ethan was using her as a puppet to destroy their traditions. He gathered fleets loyal to him and prepared to strike. When the news reached them, Lysara and Ethan stood together over the star map. "They'll hit Virexis Prime in 3 days," she said, voice steady but urgent. "If they take the capital, everything we've built will collapse." Ethan nodded. "Then we hold the capital. Together." She looked at him, a flicker of emotion crossing her sharp features. "If we fail, they'll execute us both." "Then," he said with a grim smile, "let's make sure we don't fail." The battle for Virexis Prime. The capital's skies burned. Varric's fleets descended in shimmering wedges, their hulls bristling with weapons. From the surface, the city's spire seemed to tremble beneath the thunder of orbital bombardments. Ethan commanded the defense from the vanguard, while Lysara coordinated Virexian loyalist forces from her former palace. Human destroyers weaved between massive Virexian dreadnoughts, their combined firepower holding the enemy at bay. But Varric was clever. He concentrated his attack on the planetary shield generators, knowing that once they fell, the capital would be defenseless. Ethan's voice cut through the comms. "Lysara, I'm sending down a strike team. We'll hold the generators." Her reply came instantly. "I'll be there with you." He hesitated. "It's going to be hell down there." "I was born in hell," she said sharply. "Now I choose to fight for something better." The battle on the ground was chaos. Burning streets, shattered defense towers, civilians fleeing as Varric's shock troops advanced. Ethan fought with relentless precision, his rifle cutting down enemies with each measured burst. Beside him, Lysara wielded a ceremonial war staff like a blade, her movements graceful but deadly. They reached the generator complex just as the enemy breached its gates. For 15 brutal minutes, they held the line, shoulder to shoulder. Ethan saw her stumble once, blood streaking her temple, but she didn't slow. When the last enemy fell, she collapsed against him, breathing hard. "You saved the capital," he said. "No," she murmured. "We did." Ending the human-born empire. Weeks later, the war was over. Varric was executed for treason. His fleets dismantled. The Imperium's council chamber was rebuilt, not in the old gold and obsidian, but in steel and glass, with banners of both human and Virexian colors. Lysara stood at the dais, her silver hair now tied with a crimson band. Ethan stood beside her, not as a conqueror, but as a co-ruler. Together, they addressed the gathered nobles, governors, and human representatives. "Today," Lysara declared, her voice echoing, "we end the empire of oppression. In its place, we build a new order, one where strength serves justice and power protects the weak." Ethan stepped forward. "This is not a Virexian empire. This is not a human empire. This is an empire born from both, forged in battle, tempered in trust." The chamber erupted in applause, some genuine, some cautious. But the seed was planted. Later, in the quiet of the council balcony, Lysara turned to him. "When I knelt before you that day, I thought I was begging for my life," she said softly. "Now I realize. I was asking for a future." Ethan smiled faintly. "And you got it."